All right, so today we're going to be talking about hi-fi experiences that blew our mind. There's quite a few. Why don't you start?
Okay. I think starting humble, like when I first got into hi-fi,
Okay, good start.
that would be getting open back headphones
Okay.
and hearing soundstage and layering for the first time.
Yeah.
That was like the whole, basically the rabbit hole for me.
So what headphone was that for you?
Okay. I bought the Mastrop, the
Mm-hmm.
AKG K7XX.
Okay.
And I originally got those because I thought they were nice gaming cans.
Yeah.
And then I was always like some tech enthusiast, like when it comes to like computers and like TV and whatnot. I was like, okay, finally I'm gonna, invest in some nice headphones for audio. And I thought my computer speakers were whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I went into the headphone rabbit hole, and there's so many headphones out there.
I think that's how like most of us get started. Is
Yeah.
like I remember the mass drop was a huge thing back then.
Yeah.
Well, it still is kind of, but there was the 6XX, which was the Sennheiser HD650, right?
Yeah, and I
And then there was the 7XX, right?
Oh, was there?
Yeah, isn't that what you're talking about?
No. Oh yeah, the 7XX
Yeah,
AKG. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
you got,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So there was two bandwagons, and you
Yeah.
would go because I mean, unless you're loaded and you bought both, which
Yeah.
I wasn't certainly at the time. You had to choose one or the other. So it's
Mhm.
interesting because you went the other route. I went for the 6XX,
Yeah.
and I mean, I bought mine
I mean,
used.
I got the 6XX. Like before the 6XX even came out,
Yeah.
I started buying a lot of just $300 headphones, and I
Yeah.
eventually accumulated a lot. And what got me into headphones in the first place was my older brother. He bought himself some Bear Dynamic. I think it was like the DT 880 600 ohms, and he had a sound card too. So I got a sound card not knowing all the crap that I was getting myself into, because that sound card was absolute crap.
Okay.
I think the only reason I kept it was for the optical.
Yeah. I think the really mind-blowing experience for me was from headphones to speakers.
Oh,
Like for me, it was interesting because like I think I mentioned this before in other podcasts that I did with Audio Excellence and so on. But the moment I walked into Audio Excellence and met Philip, right? For those of you that don't know Philip on this channel, he's my coworker. He used to be my coworker when I used to work at Audio Excellence, and he introduced me to these gigantic speakers. Well, at the time being, it looked gigantic. It was the Wilson Audio Sabrinas. And today I'm just like, that's not even gigantic anymore, right?
they're heavy though.
But the way they were set up, right? I never experienced stereo like that, because usually how I obviously saw speakers before, but it was in a studio setting where they were on a console or a studio stand or some sort, and they were not like set up in a home setting. So literally the way they were set up, I thought they were for display, not for playing. One speaker here, one speaker there. I kind of found that odd. I was like, is this for display? Like, why would they set it up like this? Like, why not have each other, speaker one, side by side to show it off? And then he started playing some music, like some old music,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like quite impressed, right? And it was a different thing from headphones, because now the soundstage and imaging was just incredible. And I asked, of course, the bass as well, and I asked, Philip, what's going on here? Like, and he was telling me how, I know you come from headphones, but, the real game is in speakers. And I had a good, like, 30-minute argument with him, because he gets argumentative at times, right? He gets a little bit feisty.
Yeah.
So I was all like, I was feisty too, and I was very opinionated. So I was like, headphones best thing in the world, right? And he was like, no, listen, there's things headphones can do, but speakers are better. And we were just going back and forth.
Yeah.
And I just had a good 30-40 minute by myself in that room. I wasn't too busy at the time, and it just blew me away. And listening to more and more speakers, just finding the difference. Now I enjoy more speakers than headphones.
And it's the same here.
Yeah, that was a really mind-blowing, like when I say mind-blowing, I mean really mind-blowing experience for me, because that was a huge jump in my journey. So for those of you that may be watching this, I know most of you guys are like speaker guys, but if you have not experienced speakers, and I mean really experienced them, not in a studio setting, near field setting, yes, that's good too, but in a stereo setting like the one you see here in the background with the speakers, try that, because that's gonna really change your life.
That's rediscovering your music, essentially.
Absolutely. So next up,
I mean, okay, so continuing on what I was saying.
well, before we go on, we're gonna like scale it up from here. So this was like the beginning of our thing, and then we'll scale it up to more of the mind-blowing experiences. Anyways, go on.
So I think one of the things that, like, when I was a kid, realizing what bass was, because when you're a kid, you listen to like rinky-dinky radios, and like, and I think our family got like a really nice SUV, and there was like a Bose system. It was like a Honda Pilot fully loaded, and it had bass.
Oh yeah, it did. Yeah.
And then that car got in an accident, and we downgraded, and that car did not have bass. And I was like, what's missing? Because there's no impact, there's none of that. And ever since, until I started going to high school, and I heard a home theater system for the first time, I didn't know what real bass was. Yeah. Like when the room gets pressurized. So what really, really steamrolled me into, make me discover what a good speaker is when I started getting into home theater and trying to figure out, like, how do I get that bass that pressurizes the room? Like, like, is a speaker supposed to do the full range like that? Or, is it like getting a dedicated subwoofer? And then what makes a good speaker a good speaker? Right. Is it the imaging? Is it, the dynamics? I hate you. I hate you.
Let's be right in there. 1 second. Yeah. Hey, Doug.
I hate you.
No. I'll call you back. I'm actually filming right now, so okay. Say hi to everyone. All right. Nothing important. Thanks, Doug. Okay, that was Doug from Soundstage. I should really put my phone.
I put my phone in airplane mode.
I'm so sorry, guys. Anyways, go on.
What was I even talking about?
You were talking about pressurizing the room with the bass. What's a good speaker?
Yeah, so I was looking to just get like a projector for a home theater, and I was on a budget. Yeah. So I went to go demo an Epson UB5020 UB. Yeah. And that dude had a Dolby Atmos 11-channel system with 2 SVS subwoofers, and he played Mad Max for me, I think. And I was like, what the hell? I'm like transported into like a war zone.
So he was basically balling.
Yeah, he was balling. And he was really humble about it, and he wanted me to have a good time. And once you experience that, you can't go back.
Yeah, I think you were quite fortunate in that way, because you literally had many chances to listen to other people's systems. Like you visited, this guy, and then I remember when you visited me with the Magnapens and Kepler's 50s. Yeah, that was interesting, because you were actually there to buy an amplifier, but I was really interested in your opinion about those speakers, right? Yeah. Yeah, that was, I think, the first time you bought something relating to stereo. I mean, you bought like headphones and recreated headphones all the time before, but I think that was the first time with anything to do with stereo, right? The Meitner or the shit LiDAR. Yeah.
And dude, at that point of time, like when I thought like good speakers, as a normal consumer, I would think maybe Polk, Klipsch, Bose. Like everyone would say good things about Bose, but I never fell into the hype of Bose. I just thought it was all bass, and I was like, what are these small cubes? Like, what?
All about the bass. All about that bass.
No, because that's what what would be on the radio. When the bass notes hit, that it would be amazing. But then I started meeting people like you, and I'm fortunate enough that in like the Greater Toronto area, there's a lot of nice audiophiles who love sharing the journey.
Honestly, man, that's just Canadians.
Okay, that might just be Canadians.
It's like,
but I've heard like Klipsch horns for the first time, and I didn't even know they were speakers. I thought they were furniture when they were in the corner of the room. And then when the owner told me he was running it off like a 5-watt tube amp, I was like, what? And I went to that guy to buy HD 800 headphones, and he showed me his speakers instead. And I was like, this is a trap.
Oh yeah, that's a trap.
It was definitely a trap. And yeah, it was just learning. Like, it was about learning what my preference is when it comes to like a speaker. Like, what do I like? What should I look for?
Yeah.
And understanding myself.
I think that's a lot of people out there actually that can relate to that. But one of the experience I had that was really mind-blowing after finding about speakers was actually going from modern speakers to vintage stereo.
Oh yeah.
And that was a huge thing for me because I was this young guy who, and there's this whole vintage Canadian scene in the back that people don't realize. There is these guys that love JBL speakers and Altex and have a collection of them. I mean, I went into this guy's house one time, right? To buy a pair of JBL L100s. And I remember seeing like a wall of stacked JBL speakers, and just you know, by calculating from the eye with the eye, I'm guessing like good 200-300K on that wall. And that was not the end of it. He had like Pioneers and Sui in his basement stacked all the way to the roof. Like this guy was a hoarder, right? And his living space, get this, his living space is smaller than his you know, speaker collection and, you know, the space that the stereo stuff is taking place.
Vintage audio, I feel like hitting myself in the head, because when I was like, you know, a teenager, like my dad had like speakers that he told me he spent a lot of money on, like you know, like, well, it was like a humble like Technics stack, but he paid like $7,000 for like the whole system. And I went and got myself small little computer speakers. And he's like, hey, why don't you just take my Technics system or whatnot? But I was like, nah, I don't want that old stuff. And then, you know, I think it was like 5 years after I actually hooked up that system in a nice, you know, stereo setting. And I was like, wow, I really did myself a disservice by not hearing that system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
it's like, what gems have I missed out?
Yeah, you know, Koreans, and I remember this is when I was like 6 years old. So like this was way back. But in Korea, you know, Macintosh, like Koreans love Macintosh, okay? And so like I remember going over to you know, my grandfathers and, you know, cousins, and, you know, Koreans have this big family structure. So I would go over to these people's houses. I don't even know who they are at some point. I'm just like, uncle, okay, uncle. Right? And I remember them having like, you know, Macintosh MC275, MC30s, MC60s, you know. I saw those things, and from memory, I don't know exactly the models, but like it was tube amplifiers Macintosh. I remember that label. And it was later, you know, in my life that I began to collect vintage Macintosh pieces. And that really changed my life, hearing the MC30 and the MC60 for the first time. Because the thing is, what really blows my mind is the vintage stuff that's out of spec versus the ones that's of spec. And some may argue like, you know, it's not the same thing as back then, you know, blah, blah, blah. But just hearing the difference between the ones that has gone old to the ones that's like now refurbished and new, kind of, just blows your mind, because you just realize how many people are listening to vintage stuff thinking that this is a sound of the past, but they're not. It's out of spec. It's not supposed to sound that way. And it's a pretty huge difference depending on the condition of the amplifier that's in. So I remember one of the mind-blowing experiences that I had was the Pioneer SX1080.
Okay.
1080. And there's the bigger version. I think it's a 1280. There's a 1250. There's a lot of like, there's the budget ones like 750, 850, 950. I think.
Okay.
There's many models, but I got the 1080, and these are gigantic, like heavy, like really, really heavy. So I was breaking my back, brought it upstairs, and I hooked it up to my JBL L300s. Now, this is pretty far in my journey.
Yeah.
Now, JBL 300s also blew my mind, because that was a whole entire thing, you know.
Yeah,
God,
blew me away too.
God damn, I love that speaker. But hooking it up, I just heard a massive difference from my Meitner to this. And this was a receiver. And this thing was gigantic, was heavy, you know, it sounded so sweet, great impact, and smooth in the mid-range. And I thought it was great. Until one of the channels started to like fizz out. So I decided, and this happened pretty quickly, and so I decided to look up the schematic and go crazy with it. I messed up a little bit here and there, and then, but it was nothing that, dramatically, kind of made me throw the amplifier away. It was nothing that intimidating. So I went through it, learned soldering for the first time. I was never really good at soldering. I knew how to do it, never good at it, but like that was like when I started really soldering and doing all these little things to fix it, and I finally fixed the amplifier. Now I could have stopped there, but you know me.
Yeah, you probably upgraded it.
I go extreme.
Uh-huh.
So I replaced all the capacitors. I replaced like everything in there practically with the closest spec possible, with the with the best parts possible with it.
And that's really satisfying.
Yeah, and I got all the measurement tools just because of that receiver, right? And that kind of led me to keep using the gear to, measure things and stuff like that. But that was down the road. But really, that receiver got me started collecting also like measurement tools and stuff like that, and actually soldering and all that stuff. But that receiver, after it was refurbished and made the wood all nice too, hooked it up, listened to it, and immediately I was just like, what the hell have I been hearing?
Yeah.
It was an entirely different like it was better like 10 times. Like I was hearing somewhat like of the actual sound signature, but it was like a curtain that just opened up. It was like a teaser.
My God. The biggest thing for me was discovering system synergy.
Oh yeah.
And how I was like, okay, you spent all the money on the speaker or the headphones. As long as you get enough volume, you're good, right? Yeah. I was ruining the experience. Like after I realized that I wasn't powering equipment properly and like my electronics were bad, I had to revisit a lot of components that I dismissed in the past because the synergy was just off. And I'm one of those guys where it's like, you can tell me that I'm wrong, but until I experience it and go through that,
I freaking know.
Yeah,
I freaking know.
There's tons of times where I'm like, Jay, I'm buying this, and then Jay's like, Tujin, don't do it. You're gonna regret it.
This guy never listens, right? And every time
I'm stubborn.
But 100% of the time I'm right, and you know this. But despite this,
but I won't admit it.
He won't admit it. He just keeps going. He just keeps making mistakes. And you know what? I just sometimes just go like, he's gotta live through it. He's gotta learn one or the other. But he prefers the hard way.
I mean, I smarted up over time. You don't see me buying the same thing over and over again.
Well,
it's usually be like, hey Jay, this and this happened, and you'd be like, Tujin, I told you. And I'd be like,
I'm at a point where I don't even say I told you so anymore. I just go, okay,
bring it over.
Yeah, bring it over.
Go get it and then bring it over a week after.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Another experience that I had was actually going from solid state amplifiers to tube amplifiers, and that was a big change. And my first tube amplifier was the old Carry amplifier. I think it's the SLI 80. I could be wrong with the model, but that was a very nice tube amplifier that was affordable. I bought it for like $750 Canadian at the time. The price has gone up now, but that was a collectible. And also, after that I went to like Marantz 8B, which now is like $5,000.
Yeah, it's a fortune.
I bought it for $2,000 at the time. That was like unheard of.
Yeah, that's the thing with audio. It appreciates. Certain things appreciate in such a short period of time quite a bit. So when I got into the hobby, I could have got some great items, but I just totally overlooked them. But I didn't know better.
Yeah,
or I would have sold stuff way too cheap.
It's like stock, but like worse. It's like, woo, right?
Yeah.
Like JBL speakers and Macintosh pieces. My God, just keep it. Like whoever has, just keep it, because the price will go up. A really good
product either keeps its value or goes up in value.
Yeah. I remember like during the lockdown and the coronavirus, because people were like buying stuff and
people were buying
lots of stereo purchases, and people who hasn't been doing it, getting into it and learning about vintage audio as well. Like I remember like the price for the JBL 4311, the L100, the most common ones that people would have some type of memory about, jacked up like $2,000. Like I would be able to buy these. This is a reference from anywhere from $650, depending on the shape, to $800. just a few months down the road before. Went from $1,000, right, which was just right before coronavirus, all the way up to like 2000, 2005. I saw a guy selling it for $3,000.
Well, I mean, I saw this that happen with vinyl,
Yeah.
like turntables and stuff. Like once COVID hit, like it's hard to find just any relatively like reasonable deals.
Yeah. And then oh yeah, back to the tube amplifier.
Yeah.
The tube amplifier was a hard-hitting realization for me about what the hell I was hearing, because I heard a tube. I upgraded all the tubes to like new old stock tubes, and it sounded amazing, but it sounded a little bit dark, and I thought maybe that's how it's supposed to sound, until one of the tubes went bad that I just bought.
Oh, yeah.
And this was the red bass, all the raves about the red bass RCA, 5691, I think. If I get these numbers right, like just clap for me, because like there's so many.
Yeah, there's so much.
And you have to understand, I never sold tubes before anywhere. Yeah. So, but I got this tube and it went bad immediately, unfortunately. Never got to return it, because the thing with tube is it's kind of hard to return, because you can't identify if it was user end, it was the amplifier. Like,
yeah, there's so many things that can go wrong.
Return with tubes is very, very iffy. So anyways, I just, I still have it. And yeah, one of them is bad, one of them measures good. So this is when I realized I need a freaking tube tester if I'm going to have tube amplifiers.
See, this is the whole reason why I didn't get into tubes. For one, like the cheap or budget entry stuff lacks a lot of the convenience features or just like the looks or the aesthetics that I want.
But the sound is worth it. How many times do I have to tell you this?
It's a room heater, dude.
It
doesn't work with everyone's lifestyle.
I have tubes right here. Look at this.
They weigh
Beautiful.
a ton. Those are back-breaking
The
tube
heavier
amps.
the tube amplifier, the better it is.
You know what? That's probably something you'd want to say for everything except for headphones.
No, not necessarily, but tube amplifiers, transformers, right? But anyways, back to the story. And so I switched the tubes to like the stock tube, basically. And how I did it was I had to take out each tube, plug it in, to see if the music was playing again. It was very tedious. And the luck would have it, I have the worst luck, was the last tube that I switched out. And that was the, red bass RCA. And after switching it out, I was just like I didn't want to admit it, because I spent a lot of money on those red bass tubes. But because because they were going bad, it sounded dark, right? Yeah. But then when I switched it, I didn't want to admit it, but it sounded so much better even with the stock tubes.
Oh, that's the thing, right? When you put money into something,
exactly,
and you think it's going to be better, you convince yourself it's going to be better. But sometimes things just sound good as
but
is.
I was convincing only myself because I spent so much money on it, right? But then I was just like, I was not really happy with the sound. So when the sound died, I was like, new tubes, right? Yeah. But that's when I realized I need a tube tester to really know that, have a peace of mind that my tubes are of spec and it's measuring good and all that. And you never know, because when you run tube amplifiers, a tube may go bad and you may not be hearing what you paid for, and that will be like sad, realizing that after 3 months of listening to the thing, right?
Well, that kind of reminds me of the thing where it's just like, just because something may be up there in the price range, doesn't guarantee it's going to sound good.
Absolutely not. I mean, look at the SMSL SU9 versus the SMSL
SP400
review we did a blind A/B test, and someone commented about how it was not a blind A/B/X test, and absolutely, but that's the entire point. If Tujan had to do a blind A/B/X test where he listened to the first one, listened to the second one, and listened to a random one, and had to play a matching game, that would make no sense, because first of all, the whole point is he doesn't know what he's listening to. Second of all, he has, by the way, I didn't influence him in any way, but even if I said, hey Tujan, I love this SH9, it sounds better, the cheaper one sounds better, he would not have he would have to have superpowers to look over the wall to pick the one that I picked, right? He was totally blind. The thing was like double layers of wall, you can see in the film.
And the other thing is that even though I said one was more to my preference, the difference was so minute
Yeah,
that I had to focus
that was the
on
entire
what I
point.
was hearing.
And you're talking about, okay, so I think I said that the SH9 was double the price of the, sorry,
no,
the SP400 was double the price of the SH9, but no, the SH9 is 3 times cheaper. So it's actually 3 times the price difference.
Yeah.
So think
And
about that for a
that's
minute.
a good thing, because that's an absolute bargain if you're getting that. I mean, unless you need the more power.
Yeah, that's why when I get excited sometimes with the reviews, because some of these things sound really good for the price, like the Burst and Funk, for example, right?
Yeah.
The Burst and Funk amplifier was just mind blowing for me because you heard it, you're borrowing it right now. I
Yeah.
kind of miss it already, but the thing is, it's a small amplifier.
Mhm.
You don't expect much of it, right?
Yeah, you really don't.
It has like a wall plug with the switching power supply, I think,
Yeah.
and you don't expect much from it. Yeah, so the camera cut out, but
We were talking about the burst and
yeah,
funk.
the Burst and Funk. Yeah, you don't expect much from it. Was what
Yeah.
we're talking about. And
If I did not know Burson at all, no
Mhm.
experience with their product at all, I would totally dismiss it.
yeah, absolutely. And it's a small amplifier that's like, is it more of a headphone amplifier or a stereo amplifier, right? But then I heard it with my KEF LS50, and I was just like, why is this powering this like this and sounding like I was like trying to like make my like understand.
Come to terms.
Understand. You
what's
come to
happening.
terms, like understand, because I hate it when I can't understand it, right? So usually in my reviews I talk about, well, this it sounds really great and it's really good value because the transformer is big, it's quality parts, clarity capacitors, there's always has to
You're
be
trying to make the connection between
try to make the
two.
connection, and I always believe that there's a connection with the Burson stuff. Yes, the quality parts are there. It's a classic Burson quality, but it's small, right? It doesn't output a ton of power, but yet it sounds powerful. It sounds like
And it's not Class D.
Yeah.
Which is typically what you would get in such a small
that's
design.
what I'm saying, and it sounds like a 200 watt amplifier when it's like what is it like
45 watts.
like something
forms,
yeah
something
like
that.
into 8 ohms I think, but
Something like that.
very low power,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, wow, the driving. That's the thing. That's why in the beginning I was all about the watt pairings, and I still remember telling Villa, how many watts is it?
Yeah. I mean, because that's the stereotype. That's the marketing, right? It's always
Exactly.
like, more watts, more power. And then you realize how many things are like overrated. Like you'd see like those karaoke speakers and they'd be like 1200 watts. And I'd be like, I don't even think your outlet can like give that.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I'm just like, I was asking about Philip, like, how many watts? And he was like, what do you mean how many watts? It doesn't matter. I'm just like, what are you talking about? It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
But, okay, to be fair, watt is a good indication. But at the end of the day, I mean, just like the Burst and Funk, there are amplifiers and their like name, for example, right?
Mhm.
That can drive speakers to like better than 200 watt amplifiers. So to me, watt is kind of a meaningless. Well, not meaningless, but it's a reference point. It's not an absolute.
Well, here's the thing with me, right?
Yeah.
When I worked at like home theater and I used to like sell home theater and whatnot, right? You get Denon AVRs, Yamaha AVRs, all those budget AVRs that would say, 600 watts, 200 watts per channel, and they'd be excessive, or they'd kind of lie about the spec.
Yeah.
And then there'd be NAD,
Yeah.
which to anyone else would be like, what is this? There's no marketing. Like no one really knows what NAD is unless you experienced and you've heard NAD. And they would severely underrate what their power is. And when you go to demo, like, speakers off an NAD amp,
Yeah.
you'd be mind blown by the authority and how much power it has compared
Absolutely.
to like the Yamaha or the Denon, especially the entry level stuff that they would try to, force you to buy.
Yeah, and then there's the tube watt versus solid state watt, right? The big argument there. Oh my god, like solid state is, it's like a power that is like much powerful than solid state amplifiers.
That got me really confused when you had speakers. I don't even remember what speakers at that point, but you had a tube amplifier, and I come into the room and I'm like, whoa, there's so much authority. There's so much volume. Like there's a lot going on in here. And
Yeah.
then you tell me that the tube amp that you're using is like 10 watts or something. I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
What's real? What is reality?
Yeah, I remember going like, Yeah, 10 real good powerful watts, and you'll be like confused as shit. What does that even freaking mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I remember like JBL versus Tannoy. Like, so there's like Tannoy guys, and then there's JBL guys, and then if I go to the Tannoy guys, it'll be all about Tannoys, and they'll be like, Tannoy speakers are the best. And then I'll go to the JBL guys and like, yeah, the JBL speakers are the best. I'm like, come on, guys, like, give me an answer. So I had to really experience it myself. So I had the Tannoy Berkeley speakers and the Tannoy Arden speakers, the cheapest ones of the bunch. And then I went up to like the blue drivers, the red drivers. Those were really expensive. I didn't have a long time with them because like I would buy them, listen to them, and sell them because that was really a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to experience them. So
I think the worst thing for me is when you're online and you're like a newbie and someone with authority says, this is the speaker you need.
Yeah.
Like they say this is the best speaker. It's the only speaker you need. But that actually does not end up being your taste. Like everyone has their own preference. And it's until you understand your preference, you know what your perfect speaker is.
Absolutely. That's exactly why in my reviews, right, in our reviews, we don't say this is it. This is what you buy. It's always up to your preference, up to what kind of music you listen to.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things. And I hate it when reviewers or person of authority online, whether it's forums, Facebook, whatever
forums,
it is,
all the time
it's
on
like
forums.
this is it. This is the best. This is all you need. Like the Crown amplifier. This is it. This
measures clean. That's all
it's
you
better
want.
than $20,000 amplifiers, right? And I had a consulting with one of the Patreons, and here's the thing. This individual had a large budget, and he was looking for like really top tier speakers, right? And he was asking, is Vocal better, Wilson better, Magicals? And I was just like, look, it really depends on the music you listen to and your preference. At this price point, right, you're looking for the sound characteristic that you like. There is no absolute perfect speaker even at that price point, because a lot of the compromises are kind of taken away and you have a larger scale. But at the same time, that's exactly why Vocal has their top of the line speaker and Wilson has their top of the line speaker. If you think about it, if we get to that level, shouldn't all speakers sound perfect and all equal?
Yeah, like isn't there like a holy grail that every speaker should strive for?
Exactly. So there's a company's take on what that is. So at that price point, it's not about one is better than the other. It's about which one do you prefer, right?
Yeah.
And even then, you don't get perfect.
Yeah, and I hate it when people dismiss a speaker entirely because they do one small thing wrong. It's like if you want a clinical speaker or like something that's very truthful, get a studio monitor.
Like I always say, you have to find what you can live with.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole rabbit hole. Like I remember going from this speaker to that speaker because this speaker wouldn't do this, so I went to a speaker that do that, and then going like, oh, this speaker doesn't do this, and then so I'm looking for something perfect, and that's just the rabbit hole. You never get perfect.
You have to basically find what you are willing to compromise.
Exactly. Like, is it the bass? Is it the treble? Is it the mid range? Is it a little bit of tonality?
Yeah.
What is it that you're willing to sacrifice? And of course, you can add a subwoofer, or
like with Magnipans, right? Like they're so fast, holographic, but then they don't have that bass authority.
Yeah. Well, depending on the amplifier, and you won't get that air as much as a speaker, right? A cone speaker, a box speaker. So it really depends on what kind of compromises you are willing to live with. And so finding that out was also like kind of mind blowing for me, because that's like a Zen moment, that's like a moment, right? It's like, maybe what can I possibly live with, right? Because you always want it perfect, and you're like, what is important to me, right?
You know what helped me kind of figure out what I want is when I started working at Audio Excellence with you.
Yeah.
And the first thing, when I came in was I got to demo the Aidas, the Sonos Favor, like that, like $500,000 system.
Yeah.
And to me, just sitting on that couch, I felt like I was in a throne. I was like, what is this luxury? What am I about to witness and hear?
Yeah.
And I wasn't disappointed at all.
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap. And, you know, some of the music was music I've never heard.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's music I did hear, like I know of. And I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is incredible. But then also it was like, okay, so I've heard systems that aren't that much, but get somewhere, you know, within that kind of range, the way I you know, that
Absolutely.
sensation, the feeling that I get when I'm on that seat. So it's like, okay, now I've heard what, like, you know, a $500,000 system can do. What can I do within my means to get me as close to that, to my preference?
Absolutely. It's the diminishing return thing is real, right?
It's incredibly real.
I mean, it's the same thing with microphones, right? I could choose to get this microphone, which is around the mid tier. Each of these microphones are what, like 600 Canadian dollars or something like that.
Yeah.
I could choose to stay with this microphone or go up, but I would just get a different sound signature. And
Will our viewers even notice?
yeah, is it better? And will you notice, right? They won't probably notice.
Well,
so.
it's like the same thing with like computers, right? Like you could have a really, really good gaming computer, but will you actually tell the differences in detail?
Yeah.
Does that matter to you?
I think finding that out was not much of a mind-blowing experience, but more of a kind of like calming, because I'm just like, thank God I don't have to spend that much to get a good sound.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know what actually blew my mind was I actually went over to this person's house, and at this time I owned a around $80,000 system, MSRP.
Okay.
And because I was in the industry, I got accommodation. I think that was a good like $40,000-$50,000 out of my pocket.
If I had to convince myself 5 years ago the amount of money I've spent on audio, I would think I would be crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean my cartridge, right? I had a cartridge that was 7,000 Canadian dollars. The Koetsu Rosewood signature.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy stuff.
I wanted to like shoot myself because I was getting great sound. Don't get me wrong, I was getting fantastic sound. But I went into this guy's place. Mm-hmm. He had a bigger space than me. He had a set of speakers, nothing in between, no rack. I'm like, no rack? A set of speakers, I think it was like a Poke something. Mm-hmm. And he had a small amplifier on the side. And he played music for me.
Yeah.
And I sat there on the chair going like, what am I about to hear, huh?
Yeah.
Like, it can't sound better than my $80,000 system. And immediately when he clicked play, I don't even care what music he was playing. I was like, what the hell is this perfect center imaging soundstage, this roundedness that's coming from the middle? And I was like, what's going on? And so I asked to, play my music because maybe he had really good recordings. Mm-hmm. So I played my music and I was just sitting there just flabbergasted. I was just like, what the hell is going on? Mm-hmm. And I started to wonder why, and the conclusion was that it's the room.
Yeah, it's like nothing could really replicate space.
Yeah,
like having actual space for your speakers, breathing room, placement.
Yeah,
the acoustics.
Yeah, the thing was he had these speakers perfectly placed. He had like tapes. He measured it all out, and turns out that he had acoustic treatment in his room, but it was really well done. It was not like visible at all because these were like covered with like really nice fabric, and I didn't notice them when I walked into the room. It was kind of integrated into the room. Really nice room, by the way. Anyways, yeah, the dog's barking. I think we're going too long, but yeah, so many mind-blowing experiences, and we can just go on and on about these stories, but I think we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So we'll end it here. I think our sushi is here almost soon too, so we gotta eat.
I think it's probably at the door.
I'm very hungry, so thank you for watching. We'll do more of these videos in the future, more of these podcasts. I hope you guys enjoyed our story, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
See ya.